The gambling addict is affected, right? And I think we can all recognize that. But the toll and the level of trauma that it has on particularly your spouse or a family member is devastating. The addiction has led to the breakdown of our marriage, and ultimately, we are now separated and going through a divorce. The weight of that is indescribable.
In today's episode, I interview the gambler wife. She makes content online to help those who are struggling as the affected other in a gambling addiction. But before we dive into her story, I have just one favor to ask from you. There's so many of you that regularly watch this channel but aren't yet subscribed. So if you would do me the favor of hitting that subscribe button, my promise to you in return is that I'm going to continue to seek out guests each and every day to share their story, to help the entire world realize that gambling addiction is real, but help is also out there. For those that are just seeing you for the first time, of course, we're going to link all your socials in the description of this video for them to check you out. But give us the elevator pitch. Why do you do what you do?
Oh, I do what I do, and I share what I share, as raw and as vulnerable as it is, as the wife of a recovering gambling addict, ultimately to just spread awareness. Because I
Absolutely.
truly feel like there's a lack of awareness out there, and I want to be a voice for those that are going through it.
Now, when you say awareness, I think people are beginning to become aware about gambling leading to problems. But one thing that's definitely flying under the radar, and I'm really happy that we're having this conversation, is how gambling addiction impacts more than just the person who is doing the gambling. Is that kind of the focus of your content?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think more so now than ever, it's easier for individuals to just download an app. We're surrounded by gambling ads and sports betting promotions every day, and they are heavily marketed. And there's little to no safeguards in place. And it's easier now than ever to just lose everything from the palm of your hand in a second. And when that happens, it doesn't just destroy the addict's life, it destroys their entire family, and especially for the spouse, their stability, safety, and trust.
Yeah. Well, let's dive right into it then, I think. Like, take us through your story. How did you find out that your husband was a gambler?
So, my story is obviously very different from what you share, right? I am sharing as the wife of a recovering gambling addict. Ultimately, the addiction has led to the breakdown of our marriage, and ultimately, we are now separated and going through a divorce. I definitely want to share my story truthfully, not as an opportunity to slam my ex in any way. I do want to be respectful, but I also want to shed light on the impact that gambling and financial betrayals have on families. So, my story started when my husband came clean. One night, he said he was battling demons that I didn't know about. And I didn't know it yet, but my world was going to flip upside down, and the rug was going to be ripped out from underneath me. And at that time, I didn't have a guidebook or a roadmap or any support for what to do next. He Eventually, my investigation led to the discovery of how he was doing it, right? Because it was a daisy chain of accounts, and it took weeks of me investigating to figure out how bad it was. And when he did come clean that night, it was not as truthful as my investigation proved. So he went into, when he first came clean, I wanted to uphold my vows, right? I was married to this man. He was the father of two of my children, and I was going to uphold my vows in sickness and health, help him through this, right? So it started off as me being the doting wife that was going to help him get into recovery. And what I needed to do next was jump into action. I needed to take over the finances, start closing accounts, pulling credit reports. I had to talk to lawyers, and literally, this all happened while I was trying to protect my family's future, and my heart was shattered on the floor. It was devastating in a way that I can't even describe. Like, it brought me to my knees and humbled me in a way that I can't put into words. Okay. Overnight, I had to become a private investigator, an accountant, a therapist, a mother, trying to hold it all together, crying behind closed doors. And it just felt like too much. I was having panic attacks daily. I was barely sleeping, barely functioning, and I was just trying to get through to the next day while trying to be a good mom and keep my kids' lives as stable as I could while mine was falling apart. I guess I can get into a little bit more about the discovery, okay,
Sure.
and how bad it was. There were tens of thousands of dollars in hidden credit card debt, a home equity loan that I did not know existed. He had cashed out his 401k entirely. And then we ended up owing about $20,000 in taxes this year from his gains and losses. And I didn't even know any of this existed. I think what was the scariest part of this whole thing was the elaborate scheme to cover it up from me. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm very financially smart. I'm frugal at best, okay? He knew that I didn't like gambling. He knew how much financial stability was, what it meant to me, okay? I put it at like the forefront of everything, okay? And I wouldn't consider myself a stupid person. So if I had a dollar for every time somebody said, "How did you not know?" There's no way you didn't know. Or they say things like, "It was just money. Why is it such a big deal?" Okay? First of all, it's way more than that. And second of all, the scheme behind it was terrifying. Like that alone was so hard for me to acknowledge and accept that this is the way he chose to do it to hide it from me. And I'm not a dumb person, okay? I checked our bank statements. We had a joint account. I would have noticed if something came out from a BetMGM or FanDuel or Caesars, and I would have asked him about it. He chose to do it in a way of incurring debt and paying it off through PayPal and from different bank accounts and things that he always had an explanation for. Okay. So that was kind of the hardest part for me to accept. And every night, Rob, I would lay in bed and I'd be like, okay, I have two options here. One, I see him through this and I accept that I have to question whether or not he's telling the truth from here on out. Okay. And shrinking into a version of myself that I didn't even recognize anymore, questioning him, right? Because I blindly trusted him up until this point. Or the other option is ultimately this leads to divorce and I have to deal with co-parenting my children with him for the rest of our lives, you know? So either way, it felt like a lose-lose situation. And now that we're going through the divorce, I can say that I do feel an immense amount of relief because I felt like the world was on my shoulders. We tried for about 5 months to make it work. He was in recovery. I had finally gotten a handle on everything, the finances, and I was starting to rebuild. And then one day I chose to open up the mail, and he works from home. There was no reason for me to open up the mail that day. Okay. He had always, from the very beginning of our marriage, we were married 6 years together, was the person that opened up the mail because he worked from home. Okay. I randomly had this thought, like, I'm just going to go check the mail. And I don't know why or who possessed me to open up the mail that day, but they did it for a reason because when I opened up the mail, I saw that he had opened up a bank account and a credit card in our 4-year-old son's name without my knowledge after
During the
everything that I had gone through.
Wow. Yeah, I was gonna ask. This was during the 5 months that you were trying to make it work.
Yep. It was about 4 months after I had found out. I found out in March of this year, and the bank account was about 4 months later in my son's name. Keep in mind, I had just spent months closing accounts, paying off loans, creating systems to protect what little we had for our future. That moment was my breaking point. Because after everything that I had done to clean up the mess, to protect our family, to give him a chance to rebuild trust, I was blindsided all over again in the worst way with my child. And it was just game over for me. Game over. Once I had to start figuring out how to pull my 4-year-old son's credit report because of the level that I could not trust him. I knew there was no coming back from that. And he had his
I
own reasons. He had his own reasons for opening up the bank account, but ultimately he did it without my knowledge after everything that I had been through. And I knew that was it. There was no coming back from that because, the mama bear came out in me big time.
yeah. Yeah, it's a very different situation once the kids get involved, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's one
Um,
thing for me to mess with me and my finances, right? And I can survive that. But once you start messing with my kids, and the reality is he has access to all of their information to do this, right?
right.
Again, little to no safeguards.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, I understand the way that we've gotten here, but this all happened over the course of what, finding out to the point that you're at now, less than a year?
Yes.
What was life like before you found out? Like, because right now, I only have 10 minutes of conversation with you to go off of.
Hmm.
It doesn't sound like I would like your husband or your soon to be ex-husband, but that couldn't possibly have been the case for the 5 years prior when you were married. Like, what was your marriage like before all of this happened?
Yeah, and that is another point of contention for us actually, because our marriage wasn't the best. It wasn't great. I think everybody has struggles within a marriage and there's a push and a pull and a compromise at some point, right? But there were things that we vehemently did not agree on. Okay. And he wanted different things out of life than I did. And we had a few points of contention and arguments throughout our marriage that had led to anger and resentment built up. And when all of this came to light, he had blamed the state of our marriage on his gambling addiction.
Interesting. So there was other things happening, but he's saying that the emotions that the gambling addiction stirred up in him was what led to these other points of contention?
Correct.
Interesting. And you don't believe him?
I don't know if I do or if I don't, because I think that he is kind of an emotionally driven person where he's very reactive. Like, I know that if we were to get into a fight, he's not going to do a whole lot to make it better. He's going to kind of spiral out of control and utilize gambling as a tool to make himself feel better and to feel that, high when
Sure.
other things in his life aren't going well.
So then, up until the point that you found out about the gambling addiction, then what was the, we'll call it excuse for the like whirlwind of emotion that he had? Did he have something else that he would point to as like the reason that he was upset?
It would be the state of my emotional well being.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really, I'd imagine that's very tough on your end to just be blamed for everything. Because if we take him at face value and say like the gambling addiction did lead to these emotions, then there was a couple of years at least where you were being blamed for something that you didn't do.
Hmm.
Wow. This is a really interesting perspective because, I was the one doing the bad things. I was the one being irritable, being angry, blaming other people for things when I was really just upset that I had lost money. So, to a certain extent, like I can relate to some of these excuses that you're saying that he was giving. It's really fascinating to me how once you found out about his gambling, then he came clean and he was like, "Oh, actually, all of that was because of the gambling." Like, what was the day like where you sat down and he kind of came clean? Could you walk me through it?
Yeah. So we were laying in bed, and it was after our two children were put down for the night. When he said he was battling demons that I didn't know about, I was like, what in the world are you talking about? Like,
Right.
elaborate, please. What in the world does that mean? And he started to give me little half truths. And then it started spilling out. And he would say things like one of two things. And I know I'm going to get a lot of heat for this, okay? But one was that the state of our marriage wasn't great. So he would utilize gambling as a way to escape. The second one was that I was controlling. And I was controlling in a way that he always wanted more. Okay. we have a beautiful home, two beautiful kids, two great careers, and we have so much to be grateful for, right? He always wanted more in the way that he would ask to spend thousands of dollars on. I can remember distinctly there was dirt bikes, Tesla, four-wheelers, things that we didn't even have space for, right? And I would always say no, and then I would feel guilty about it. And he would use that as an excuse. Well, I also gambled to win money so that we had money to pay for those things.
I get the convoluted logic. Now, to me, of course, only hearing one side of the coin, so have to keep that in mind. But when I read like the Gambler's Anonymous book, and it's like describing the compulsive gambler,
Mm-hmm.
like these are the exact things that it says to the point where it sounds like he read the book and he might have said, "Well, this is my excuse now because this sounds like it's plausible. This sounds like it could be me." Um, but then again, there's more to the story, of course, on either side. But continuing along, like I was someone that wanted to gamble to win large sums of money, buy the people that I love nice things. It's just fascinating. So the reasons that you were saying no to these lavish expenses were because they just didn't make fiscal sense.
No, again, I'm frugal at best, right?
Mm,
I think that I think that you work very hard for what you have, right? And
mm,
in our case, we work very hard for what we have individually, okay? And we both bring in incomes to this household. And, you know, at the end of the day, we had a 1 year old and a 4 year old. We were paying for daycare. We, had a mortgage, and he wanted to move to a different city and state and get a mortgage that was double what we were currently paying. And I just saw it as there's no reason for that. We have a beautiful, wonderful house. We're paying for diapers, wipes, formula, daycare, right? There's too many expenses right now to be worried about a Tesla or a bigger house or whatever. And I always used to tell him, we need to live within our means. We are not millionaires. I don't know who you think we are, but we're not millionaires. And now looking back, I think that obviously was not the right thing to say to him because it fueled him to seek gambling as a way to make money.
Well, I mean, the way you said that, it sounds like you're blaming yourself, which is not fair at all. But I do understand from like the perspective of like a really, really addicted gambler. Like that sounds like a challenge, right? It's
Hmm.
like, yeah, we're not millionaires, but why can't we be? And I think that's the big thing I want my audience to begin to overcome is this idea that gambling can make you rich. Because as we know in reality, the more that we do it, the more the losses accumulate.
Hmm.
But it is very difficult until you begin to experience it to kind of come to that conclusion. Um, okay, so I feel like I've gained a good amount of context here as to what was going on. Now, I want to know more about this 4 or 5 month period where you're trying to make things work. Following that night where he comes half clean and he's telling you that he's struggling with some problems, he's struggling with gambling. You say you go into private investigator mode. Now, in this process, you're going through financial records, you're pulling credit reports. Like, take me through the emotion that you're feeling, and is he getting frustrated? Is he getting mad that you're on his back, maybe? Is that how he's feeling?
I, every day, I literally felt like the world was on my chest and it was literally physically painful. Okay. I was trying to, you know, carry the weight of his emotions, figure out what he needed to get him into recovery and say the right things to him so that he didn't seek gambling. And he was blaming me, right? And I knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong and I knew I wasn't to blame. And at the end of the day, I respect everybody's recovery process, right? And their addiction story is their addiction story. But at the end of the day, it felt like it was a choice. And it was a choice made many, many, many times to lie, steal, and hide things from me, right? So I knew all of that, right? But again, I made a vow and I chose to marry this man and to make him the father of my child or children. So I had to set all of that aside, all of those emotions and all of the mental. I know what is right and what is wrong, right? I had to set that aside and go with the emotions and try to get him through this process, because if I allowed myself to think clearly, which I do now, right, I wasn't willing or able to walk him through it. So, yes, he blamed me even further when I started taking over the finances. It was like I was taking away his manhood, is how I felt. It was excruciating every day, but he knew it and I knew it, that it was what needed to be done in order to start rebuilding and recovering from what he had done. But it was, I mean, I can't even express to you when we had a joint bank account, okay? When we had to go into the bank meeting, right? He had to sit down in the chair and explain why, that, he wasn't under the influence, that I wasn't forcing him to be there, and that he needed to be removed from the joint bank account because he had an addiction. And it was awkward, it was painful, it was emotional, right? He's tearing up in the chair with me. We had our daughter with us. It was just excruciating. Like, it's not fun to sit through those meetings and have to face all of that from his perspective or my perspective. But it's what needed to be done, right? And then there's this whole, like, okay, when you take over the finances, okay, you go from he's spending whatever he wants, you're spending whatever you want within means, right? But then you have to take over and you have to give him an allowance.
Yeah.
No,
No,
it
that's not
was
great.
not easy. It was not
Yeah.
easy. And then you have to figure out, okay, he's off the joint bank account. What if there's an emergency? He can't have a credit card. He can't have a debit card. He needs something, right? So there's ways around it that I now know after going through this process, where they can get like a cash card through your account that you can preload. But all of this stuff, there's no handbook or guidebook out there for when this happens. And your heart's on the floor. You're trying to figure out how bad it is, what to do next, right? Keep yourself together, hold him together. And it's excruciating. It's awkward. It's painful.
I definitely want to dive into what you've done now to kind of clear up what's going on in your own personal life and protect yourself going forward. But before we get to that point, I mean, I go to a meeting. I go to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting usually once a week. I go as often as I can, and there's two guys in there that are, we call them old timers. One made his last bet in '92, the other in 2000. So they are the only two people that are there that have been coming since the year 2000. Everyone else that's there has been coming for a maximum of like a year. And so, what happened to all the people between year 2000 and last year that were coming to those meetings? Most of them went back to gambling. But the two that are still there, both of them will credit someone else in their recovery. My sponsor specifically said that if his wife and her family didn't put their foot down, he would have probably died continuing to gamble, going homeless. So, this idea of tough love, or this idea of doing the things that are necessary, it's absolutely necessary. When I first entered recovery, my mom managed my bank account and I felt like shit. I felt awful, but I couldn't gamble that money. As big of an ego hit as it was, it changed my life to now I'm at the point that I can manage my own money and life is good again. But like in those initial days, whoever's managing your money is easily going to be the bad guy, which is what makes it so difficult, right? Like, you're doing the right thing, but you're seen as the villain. At the time, like, what were you telling yourself to keep moving forward when others might have caved in and said, I can't be taking the responsibility for this person?
Like I just said, I had to separate what I knew was right and wrong from what I was trying to achieve. Because if I let myself get more in depth with my thoughts about, I know what's right, I know what's wrong, and I know what he did was wrong, and I'm trying to help him through this, but I also can't get too mixed up in my own feelings and how I feel about it, because I was angry. And I was angry, right? Every day I was having to battle whether or not I should help him through this or if I should give him a piece of my mind because I am, and again, I don't want to disrespect anybody's recovery process because I fully respect that, right? But this man he's not dumb,
Yeah.
right? He knows what he's doing. He knew what he was doing and he knew how to do it in a way to hide it from me. And beyond like the emotional aspect of what that does to your spouse, right? Finding out about hidden debt. I've said this from the very beginning. For me personally, and who I am and what financial stability means to me, he could have cheated on me and it would have meant less to me. And he knows that. He's known that from the very beginning. Financial stability is everything to me. So the way that he went about it was just absolutely devastating through the discovery and the investigation. And so every day and it angered me. I mean, I was livid, but I was also having panic attacks and like trying to take care of myself. I had to seek out therapy myself. I got on anxiety medication, which I've never been on in my life, just to control the panic attacks. He was also in his recovery, right? So it's very hard for him to carry me emotionally. And ultimately, what it did was drive a wedge between us. Not only was I the enemy because I had him on an allowance and I was controlling the finances, which also angered me because then I feel like I'm a mom to 3 children, not two. He was trying to figure out, and it fueled him even more to get angrier when I wasn't able to carry it all.
It's really interesting that I think this is the first time in the conversation, and I might be wrong, but you said he's in his recovery. So, all right, so there's this 5 month period where you're trying to make it work where he's in recovery. What does he say that he's doing in recovery to try to get better, other than you controlling the finances? Is he going to meetings? Is he seeing a therapist? Like, what does he say that he was doing?
Yes, he went to meetings and he had a therapist. He took additional steps to safeguard him from physical casinos. So we, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but we live in the state of Michigan. Okay. So physical casinos are here where you can go in and gamble, but there's also online gambling. Online gambling was a huge source of, how he lost his money and how he would choose to gamble because it was very convenient and he worked from home and he was on his computer all the time. But in-person gambling was also an issue. So he went before the Michigan Gaming Control Board and was able to successfully ban himself from all in-person gambling. So he took steps. He was in therapy. He was going to meetings. But all of this was happening still behind the scenes.
Interesting. I would maybe one day I will end up talking to him. I'm not going to ask you to refer me to him, but I'd be curious to know like if that's true, because what concerns me is like at the end point of this, you say that he had taken out a credit line in your child's name. If I'm going to meetings and I'm going to a therapist and I'm self-excluded and I'm still maybe I'm mentally struggling, but I'm like trying the recovery process, like honestly, I would not be doing that at the end of it. And like I can empathize with him, but like if he was truly doing the things that you just said, he would not have done that. So there has to be some type of not what's the right word? Discrepancy. I don't know what it might be. Maybe because like when I first entered recovery, February 8th of 2022, I went to meetings and I told my family that I was fine. I told everyone around me life was good, but I was trading stocks on my phone more than I did before. I was drinking more than I drank before. And then eventually I went back to gambling. It didn't last long because I caused such a terrible situation that I basically had to say it right away. I don't know if I believe him. Do you believe that he was doing those things?
I think I heard him on those meetings.
Mm.
Okay. Do I know if they have continued since we separated? I have no idea. I don't know. But just like what you said, he would very much make it like I'm fine, I'm not an addict. I can stop anytime I want, and again, mentally, I knew that it wasn't like that, right? Like you have to take steps to not only put safeguards in place to prevent you from doing that, but to also, work on yourself. Yeah, there was a lot of blaming, and then one minute he would take accountability, and then the next he would blame me. So it was just constantly like I'm questioning whether or not I'm sane every day. Every day I'd be like, what is a truth? What is a lie? What is he trying to achieve by doing X, Y, and Z? I mean, I was just in this spiral all day, every day, and
Yeah.
I was a wreck. And I don't think anybody really understands what it does to a spouse or to the family. And I was also, when you have children, especially young children, okay, our children are 1 and 4. My son, I was so I was such in a mode like I need to protect this little boy, right? My daughter, our 1 year old, didn't really know what was going on, but our 4 year old did know what was going on, okay? And I tried to the best of my ability to avoid anything that he could hear. Anytime I would cry, I would try to do it behind a closed door. And I don't know if it was the right thing or the wrong thing to do, but I just knew that I was in mama bear mode and I needed to protect my kids to the best of my ability. When everything was falling apart, that was something that I could control and that I could do for them. But the weight of that is indescribable.
The beautiful thing about doing these podcasts is like I'm about to be 3 years clean from gambling. I don't think about gambling. I don't wake up and I don't want to place a bet. It's not something that's a part of my everyday thought process. But every time I do one of these conversations, especially ones that are going as well as this one is, in my personal opinion, um, I gain this like sense of understanding that I just didn't have for a particular situation. And I know that I lied to family, I lied to friends, I lied to girlfriends, and I ruined a lot of relationships, but I never really sat and thought about it from their perspective. 3 years after my last bet, I still haven't really thought about it until right now. And so, just as a quick aside, thank you for sharing what you're sharing because it's actually resonating with me. And I don't even have, I'm not even married, I don't have kids, but it's giving me the perspective of like, God damn, what did I put my family and friends through? Hopefully, not to this extent, but I put them through something. And so, just thanks for being honest here.
Of course. And
Yeah.
that's why I do what I do.
Yeah. And once again, if anyone's listening that wants to find out more about the work that you're doing, check the description of this video for links to her social pages. Now, I had said I wanted to steer it to a more constructive and positive end game here in the latter parts of the conversation. But just before we get to that, you talked about how you felt so betrayed this last day when you find this credit card. You find that you need to now pull your child's credit report in order to get the full truth. What happens in the weeks following that to move us to present day? Does it immediately become a separation? Have you asked him to leave the house? Like, what happened following that day?
So I, at this point, was going back and forth in my head and I was spiraling and I knew that I was not okay. Like the trauma had taken a toll on me and it is traumatic. Okay. People can say what they want. It's traumatic. And the emotional turmoil that I went through during that period was enough to hopefully last me a lifetime. I don't ever want to go
Yeah.
through anything like that. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. That was my breaking point, but I had already gone through so much that led to that point. I didn't have anything left in my bucket. You know, I had given you all of the resources, all of the tools to be successful in trying to rebuild. And it felt like that was just the ultimate collapse, if you will. And there was no going back from it. So the next couple weeks were like, okay, how do we move forward? Right. And we ultimately decided on him moving out of our home. And he got a lease on an apartment. And I am here trying to stay afloat with all of the bills and create stability in the chaos that has been created. I, again, am trying to protect my children. And I know what it's going to do if I have to tell them we have to move out of our home. and I'm trying like hell to not let that happen. And since I've shared a little insight into the separation, the divorce, and the things that I'm going through now, and like the gambling addiction and the discovery and all of the trauma from that is a completely separate thing from now having to go through a divorce. And with a financial betrayal and a gambling addict as a husband, right? You're forced to move in a much faster way through divorce to protect yourself. Because once we separated, I had absolutely no idea what he was doing. None, right? I was no longer in control of his finances. He could have been incurring more debt that I may have been responsible for. So I was forced to call a lawyer and to move a lot faster than I would have liked to protect myself and my kids from any more debt or anything else that could have happened. So that it moved very quickly, Rob, and it was not because I necessarily wanted it to. It was just because I felt like I didn't have any other choice in this particular type of betrayal. You're forced to move a lot quicker than you want to sometimes.
It's all finalized now?
No,
Okay.
no, we are still going through it. And let me tell you, co-parenting with someone that betrayed you, it is not for the weak. It is not for the weak. That is a whole nother ball game. Like this divorce and co-parenting is almost equally as heavy as the betrayal.
Like, has the tone of conversation changed? Does he feel like now, like, it's me versus you, kind of?
Yes. It is not better by any means. We had, in that, the last couple weeks after, I knew it was over and we were separating, we had come to an agreement. And the agreement was very simple. I was going to get the house to offset the gambling debt that we had to pay off and drain our savings to do. And we were going to make sense of, the children's support and all of that stuff. And we were going to mostly just go through the courts because they do the determination for that. But essentially, the biggest asset that I was going to get as a result of his gambling addiction was the home. It has been a fight from the very beginning. It's been a disaster. So that is just a whole nother thing that I'm now having to deal with on top of it. And this has been nonstop for me since March of this year. It is now almost November, and I can't even express to you the level of exhaustion that I have. I am so tired. I am emotionally drained. I truly feel like I don't have anything left to give most days. And I'm just desperately trying to stay afloat on top of it. And I don't want to get too much into this, but because I don't want a pity party, okay? I don't need anyone to come in and save me, but life has been kicking me while I'm down left and right lately. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I'm trying to go through, right, go through the betrayal, now through a divorce, pay for lawyer fees, which we don't have money for because of the financial betrayal. I'm solely responsible for this house. The day after he moved out, the basement flooded, ruined the entire basement. The carpet had to be replaced, and it was $14,000 to replace that I was responsible for slowly. And he wouldn't help. And then now the lawyer fees and a whole bunch of others. So it's just financial betrayal is a totally different ballgame. It's a totally different ballgame. And now, recently with the government shutdown, my hours have been cut to part-time from full-time. So I am having to figure out how I'm going to navigate all of this. And I know there's so many people out there that have reached out to me and have given me similar stories of what's going on with them from financial betrayal situations. And some are worse than mine and some are better than mine, right? And they all have different versions of their story, but I'm still very much going through it. I'm still dealing with the fallout. And it feels like when it can't get worse, it continues to get worse.
Yeah.
So I'm still very much on this journey, and working every day to get through the wreckage.
It kind of begs the question then, like, why do the work that you're doing? Why share your story? Why try to help other people when you're still in the midst of it yourself? Like, what's the motivation?
There's not enough awareness about this because people are too ashamed to talk about it.
Mm,
They're too ashamed to
wow.
talk about it. And as it becomes increasingly more common, we are going to see more gambling addictions and therefore more families that are falling apart because of it. It just is the truth, okay? And because not a whole lot of people are talking about it, I felt like I needed to do something. In the wake of all of my trauma, I wanted to create something good out there for people to relate to and spread awareness along the way because I felt very much alone. I felt isolated. I felt like I didn't have the tools and the resources and the support and the way that I needed it to get through it. So I share my story in a very raw way in my journey throughout this to help people feel less alone.
Yeah. I think that's phenomenal. I think it's a phenomenal reason to do it, and I think it's only going to yield positive things going forward for yourself and for anyone else in the same situation. Before we got on the call, you had mentioned that to find help, to find resources, you were turning to trusty, I wrote it down, ChatGPT. And so that's where a lot of the resources were. So for someone out there that's at that complete square one, they haven't done any of the research as to how to protect themselves and their families going forward, do you have any advice for them, or do you have anywhere that you can point them towards with resources?
I do actually. So I, in my journey of sharing what I have online, I have had hundreds of hundreds of people reach out to me and say, "Me too. This happened to me too." I've said some stories are worse than mine. Some are just starting. Some have awful stories of like they're pregnant and they have no financial means and a way out, and their husband's gambling everything right now. So but every single one of them feels isolated and ashamed and no one talks about it and no one has a guidebook out there. So I spent hours, and I didn't tell you about this, but I spent hours over the last couple weeks because I've been receiving so many questions about like what were the signs, how did you start, what did you need to do first, right? And I spent weeks doing this by myself, months doing this by myself. So instead of having someone else have to go through what I went through, I created a financial betrayal support guide. Okay. And it has every resource that I needed in this situation to just start. Because when your head and your heart are on the ground, shattered into a million pieces, it's very hard to function on the level that you need to jump into action. To be an accountant, to figure out lawyers, mortgage loans, it's not easy, especially when you feel like you can't function. So it gives you a step by step guide of real actionable items that you can do if your brain is not working, like mine wasn't. So I knew that I had to jump into action because that's what you have to do, right, in those situations. But it's easier said than done in that situation. When the world is crumbling around you, it's not easy to jump into action. So it's just a very simple step by step guide of actionable items that you can take to start rebuilding and to safeguards. So I've literally listed all of the safeguards that you can for online gambling addicts, apps that you can download on your phone, things that you can do to prepare for the Michigan Gaming Control Board or Gaming Control Board based on where you stay, where you live, and the state that you live in. How to investigate, right? What do you need to do to remove your spouse from the bank account? Right? Because these are all questions that come at you like a floodgate immediately. And it's just so overwhelming. So I wanted to create something tangible that could help people to find clarity and resources and be able to plan for the future.
Yeah.
And then I also have started doing financial betrayal support sessions for
Wow.
individuals that are going through this. And I am charging for them because, again, I am currently trying to rebuild after, the financial devastation that this had on my family. But I just think that in an ideal world, I'd love to offer this for free. I truly think that
Yeah,
we need to do that more often. And I think that people need, especially in this situation, right? I have to acknowledge that it's a financial situation. So spending more money on something when you feel like you don't have it
yeah,
is tough. It's very
it
tough to make
is.
that decision.
At the same time, though, I think that there's this general like bad taste for people charging for things in the mental health field. But I'm like always just baffled by it, right? If you want someone to do this gut wrenching work and put themselves out there and work so hard on something that really might hurt them to create, and then expect them to just do it for free because they went through it,
Yeah.
I just don't think it's realistic. And when things are free, they're of a free quality. When things are paid for, they're of a paid for quality. So I'll never knock someone that's providing a high quality service with good intentions that needs to be paid for. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
As a side note, the link to the guidebook, is the guidebook paid or is it free?
The guidebook is $15, and
Okay,
the support sessions vary on how long we're together and how long the support session you book it for. But it's
sure.
all on my social media on in my bio.
So yeah, if you want to check out a link to her services in general, please check out the description of this video. She has everything listed on a stand store, and it's going to be awesome to check out. So yeah, just wanted to throw that one in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. If it was free, I would have just blasted the hell out of it, but I just got to direct people
I
to.
really put my heart and soul into it
I'm
because,
sure you did.
I wished that that existed and I could just point my finger to it and, you know, put my emotions aside for a second and just follow the guidebook.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you again for coming on and sharing this story. I think that a lot of the people who watch this channel are probably the gambler. They're probably the ones who are doing the bad stuff, putting loved ones into bad situations. I think that they even are going to be able to empathize with your situation while also maybe understanding what your husband went through, the twisted thoughts that he had. If you had a face to face opportunity to talk to someone who is actively hurting one of their loved ones with their gambling, what would you say to them?
The gambling addict is affected, right? And I think we can all recognize that. Okay. But the toll and the level of trauma that it has on particularly your spouse or a family member is devastating. And if you are actively choosing to continue in your addiction, you are also hurting them.
Well said, straight to the point. Well, once again, thank you so much for sharing. And if you're in the audience and you want to hear a story that maybe brings to life the other side of the coin, someone that's in recovery from a gambling addiction now, then I want you to watch this video next. Let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.